Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Storytelling for E-commerce. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a program manager at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit that is building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you may have just seen in the chat, the NASDAQ Center, along with our partner Mentor Cloud, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs called Mentor Makers. You can create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So find or become a mentor today by using the link in the chat. Mentorship matters to all entrepreneurs. Their success is dependent on it. Quick housekeeping, we're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event, so please submit those questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. Now, none of what we do here at the center could be possible without all the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, BPM, and HubSpot. We're humbled and grateful for their contributions. Now, during these still unique and challenging times, we're curious on how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs that we work with. So before we get started, I'm going to start by launching a quick poll to just let us know how you're feeling about your business right now. Are you optimistic? Are you in survival mode? How are you feeling? All righty. Thank you for participating. The questions are flooding in. I'm going to let this open up for another moment or so, but I don't want to delay too much before we get into this content. Awesome. I'm going to show those results. Looks like optimism is the leader, but do understand that there's a little bit of anxiety and survival mode out there. So hopefully this presentation today will help with some of those sentiments. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest in the chat. Ari Takata-Vasquez is the owner and creative director at Viscera Studio. Ari, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
So excited to learn from you. Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Just want to give a quick introduction of, of myself. I'm Ari Takata-Vasquez. I'm the creative director and founder of Viscera Studio. We're a design studio primarily working with small businesses. We really focus on passion-driven entrepreneurs. And so with that, I'll go ahead and launch in. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Oh, and thanks for putting that in the chat, Isis. Okay, so today we're talking about storytelling for e-commerce. We're gonna, we're gonna talk first about what makes for good e-commerce and some of the attributes that we're looking for in quality e-commerce sites. So the three aspects that we're gonna focus on is presentation, the second is usability, and the third is security. So in a lot of today's presentation, we're going to focus on empathizing with our customer and making sure, as we approach e-commerce, we're putting ourselves in their shoes and just making sure that we're not just on our side of things, doing the back end, trying to make everything functional. We also want to make it very attractive for them. So we're going to go through what to include on your website. We're going to talk a little bit about how to make your website an extension of your brand and how to create a cohesive look. Oops, sorry, I'm having a little bit of difficulty with my slides here. Okay, sorry y'all, give me just 1 second. I think we have the wrong setup. Okay. Here we go. Thanks for bearing with me. Oops, there we go. Let's make sure we're on the right set here. Colin, are you seeing the right slides?
Yep. Three aspects of a good e-commerce website.
Great, thank you. So first we're going to talk a little bit about presentation. So when it comes to presentation, this is just, people's first impression of your website. It's kind of what makes them either stay or leave. People in general tend to be pretty impatient when it comes to websites. And so you have a generally short, a short window of time to either keep their attention or they will bounce. So presentation is going to be really important with e-commerce. Often when I'm, helping a new entrepreneur or I'm teaching, the thing that I'm really wanting them to recognize is that it's not personal necessarily if people bounce, right? It's more just a function of people being incredibly busy and overwhelmed. On average, it takes people at least 7 points of contact before they can even remember a brand's name. And that's not to be necessarily, pessimistic about your odds with e-commerce, but just to set some reasonable expectations. So it's not something that happens overnight in general. When it comes to e-commerce, it's sort of a game of trying to build up momentum over time, ensuring that, it just takes time. It takes a lot of time because people are bombarded with, I think, something in the ballpark of 7 or 8 thousand advertisements per day. And so, while your business is amazing and beautiful, it does just take time for folks to, process all of that information that they're getting. The second aspect that we're going to talk about is usability. So this is how easy it is to navigate your site, how easy it is to make a purchase, to find out more about the business. A lot of this, when you're working on your own e-commerce site can be really tricky because you don't have the benefit of distance, right? You've probably been staring at your website for hours and hours. And so when it comes to usability, this is one of the areas where it's incredibly important for you to, talk to other people, get them in front of your website and just sort of see how they use it. So you don't want to prime them and ask them to, do particular things. Ask your friends, ask your family, hey, take a look at this website and just sort of note where they go first, what things that they're clicking on, what areas they're reading, what they're scrolling past. You can't do this part on your own. And so it's important to involve other people. I know it can be a little bit difficult when you're not you're not necessarily feeling like it's perfect or ready to share just yet. But this is going to be really important to catch any usability errors with your website. We do this for all of our clients because, again, if you've been staring at it for a long time, it's just really hard to know how other people are going to experience your website. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is security. With e-commerce, it's a little bit tricky because there are so many large businesses that do e-commerce, and Amazon has really set customer expectations for everyone sort of globally. Customers are now not used to paying for shipping. They expect really quick shipping times. They don't necessarily want to go through all the trouble of entering their information, right? They want to just do the one-click option if possible. And so, we're up against some larger companies. And so, at the end of the day, when you're a new business, you're asking people to, sort of change their typical buying habits. You're asking them to do something different because you're a newer, probably less established business. And so security is going to be really important for your customer because they need to feel okay putting their credit card number and putting their personal information into your website. And so security is going to be incredibly important for your e-commerce site. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about things to include on, your website with good e-commerce principles in mind. So here's sort of the website checklist. There's obviously a ton more nuance that we can go into on any of these topics, but this is just to kind of get you started and give you some important information. So a lot of times people don't necessarily want to put themselves on their about page, but your about page is really important. As I mentioned, you're new to your customer likely. They don't have, you're not Amazon, you're not any of these larger companies that have the same name recognition. And so the about page is really important for your customer to learn about your business, what your principles are. And it also really helps to earn your customers' trust. You want to share your story and why you're passionate about your business and what you're selling. I have yet to meet an entrepreneur that has started their business for any other reason than passion. In general, I find that all of the entrepreneurs that I've worked with, they have something sort of personal that they're putting into their business. And sometimes it can be hard to share that story at first, but the sooner you share it, the more, the easier it'll be for you to get those like adoring fans, the people who are super excited about you, the folks who are going to be sort of your evangelicals for the business. They're going to tell, their best friend, their neighbor, their cousins, they're going to tell everyone they know about your business. And they only can do that when they feel like they know you. And part of that is knowing your story. So again, I encourage everyone to put their picture on their about page. Just again, to the point of trust, I will feel a lot better putting my credit card information into a website where I feel like the business owner is also sharing a little bit of information about themselves, and I can put a face and a name to the company. So the second thing that's really going to be important is your contact page. You want to make sure your customers know that they, can have somebody to get in touch with. I think again, because large businesses tend to be really difficult with customer service, people, are sort of in some ways used to not they're used to not getting necessarily the best quality service. And so this is one opportunity for you as a small business to actually wow your audience and make sure that, they feel like they can get in touch with you if there are any errors or there are any issues with their order. They also, just will feel a little bit better knowing that you're a person who's willing to put your contact information on your website. Again, this just builds trust for your audience. The other thing that's really important that I feel like I see a lot of entrepreneurs miss at the beginning is either a tagline or a brief description on their website. You want to have, maybe one sentence of what your business is to display prominently on what's called above the fold. So above the fold on a website is basically the area that populates when you first load it before you have to scroll or do anything else. The reason this is important, again, is because people are bombarded with so much information that even if you do have great quality images of your product, or you have graphics that explain what your services are, at the end of the day, people, they're getting a lot of information, and so you want to make sure that you're giving people like that quick snippet so they know what they're looking at and they know what they're potentially buying. And it's also an opportunity for you to let your customers know why your business is special and what makes you unique. Again, there's so many different businesses out there, and I have yet to come across two that are exactly the same. No matter what, your business is always going to be unique, even if you're selling the same thing as other people, because it's you. And that's something to really amplify and tell that story on your website. So when you're thinking about developing your website, you want to think a little bit about your business's personality. Are you going to be someone who's fun? Or you want to think about who your customers are. Are they like youthful? Is the product that you're selling appropriate for your branding style? Are you trying to stick to people's idea about the type of product that you have, or are you trying to break through and do something totally different? You want to put some thought into what your brand says about your business before you even start building your website. You want to, personify your business in some way. So we'll go through a couple of examples. Okay, so this is one of my favorite case studies. Tushy, they are a, how do I describe them? They basically sell a bidet product that's under $100. So they're marketing generally towards millennials, and you can kind of tell that from their website, right? Based on the plants, you can see plants, yes. And they've sort of taken the bathroom product that normally is something sort of like people don't want to talk about or feel a little bit shy about. And instead of them, being embarrassed about it, they're actually kind of beating you to the punchline, right? And they make a lot of poop jokes. And so, they're in this branding, they're taking something that people don't love to talk about and they're actually making it fun. A bidet is not necessarily a product that you would think, oh, I'm going to totally tell all of my friends and family about it. This is so great. But they actually have a huge and loyal following because of the brand personality that they've put into their business. So I shared this example to say, if a bidet product can grow a loyal audience and have a personality, I'm sure, most of the businesses that we have will be a little bit easier to market. So two things to kind of note about this is that, they're really trying to break through in their market. Bidets, I think, are generally thought of something, either European or like for older generations. And so they're trying to tap into a younger market, and they're doing this with their fun graphics and the way that they present their brand. They've also used cool and calming colors here. This website would be totally different if they use browns and grays, right? And so they're really kind of making this product that otherwise would be something kind of gross for people to talk about, and they're making it like fun and fresh. Okay, so another case study that I like to show is LegalZoom. So LegalZoom, most of us are probably familiar with, but they sell services online and they're a self-service model. So because they're dealing, with legal items, they need to maintain a certain level of professionalism so that you trust them with helping form your business or LLC or your trust or any of those important pieces of information. But because they are a tech company and they're trying to appeal to a wider audience and maybe a little bit younger of an audience than like typical lawyers do, they've kept it a little bit more modern and fresh with simple and clean graphics. They prominently at the top described what they offer in one sentence. They do offer a ton of different services, and if they did like kind of a kitchen sinking of that, and they threw in everything that they did, you would probably be overwhelmed and just not even know where to go. So they've made it really simple for people to be able to navigate based on like their 4 categories. So when it comes to storytelling on your website, even just showing what categories you're in can be really helpful, so that people generally can see what you have to offer without going into like a ton of detail. And the other thing that they're doing really well here is they're using simple colors to make it sort of stand out, but they're not doing a ton of different graphics. So now that we've gone over those 2 examples, imagine if you saw Tushy's style of marketing on LegalZoom and vice versa. That probably wouldn't work, right? And so this is one of those aspects where storytelling is really important to the brand. You probably wouldn't trust LegalZoom if they used Tushy's branding, right? Because it would seem like a little unserious and maybe, I think LegalZoom doesn't care if they're fun. And so you probably, want to feel a little bit more trust in LegalZoom. And I also probably wouldn't be super excited about Tushy if they use super plain and boring graphics. So, they're doing a lot to tell you about who their brand is and who their customers are just through their websites. So one key takeaway is when you're creating your e-commerce brand aesthetic, keep your messaging and tone in mind. So this, of course, extends to the graphics and the way that you present your website, but it's also the type of language that you use. You've probably seen this on social media, like some brands, they want you to feel like you're talking to your best friend. So they'll say like, they'll literally say, "Hey, bestie, what's going on?" Their language is going to be a little more familiar. Whereas, brands who need to be a little bit more serious and they need to have sort of an air of authority, they're probably not going to be using that kind of language, right? They're going to be a little bit more formal and a little bit more buttoned up. So we're going to go ahead and pause there for a second to see if people, if people have any questions. Do you have any questions in the chat, Colin?
You're doing great, and no questions yet, so move right along.
Awesome. So when it comes to creating a cohesive look for your website, there are a few key things that you want to consider. And all of this, again, you want to think about before you've even started to build your website. So the first, of course, is your color palette. As we saw in the 2 case studies, the colors actually do make a huge difference in how you perceive the brand. So in general, if your brand is supposed to be something that's calming and sort of at ease, you're going to want to use cooler colors. Think blues, greens, stuff that's purples, things that are going to be sort of relaxing to the eye. If you are, selling something that has a lot of energy and a lot of excitement behind it, you might use, more exciting colors or brighter colors like reds, oranges, and yellows. So you want to think about which color palette you're going to use for your website, and you want to make sure it's in line with your brand. You want to make sure when someone sees your brand either on social media, on your website, on your business card, you want it to look like the same business. And that's just to make it easier for your customer to recognize you. Again, people are bombarded with a ton of different information each day. And so some of these more subtle branding cues can really help people remember your brand and for you to make an impression. The second thing to think about are fonts. I know that this is one that can be kind of a headache to non-designers because it's a kind of overwhelming amount of fonts, but we'll go over a couple of examples to show what types of fonts you might want to use in various applications. One thing that's really important these days that I think people are getting a little bit more aware of is accessibility issues. So you do want to make sure you're using a font and enough contrast on your website that it's going to be accessible for folks with, vision disabilities, right? So that's something that's really important as you're thinking about not only the font that you use, but your font sizes. Again, usability is going to be incredibly important for your website. The third is photography or imagery style. Again, like we saw in Tushy and for LegalZoom, the types of graphics and the types of images that you use are going to be really important. They give people cues to what your business is about. Again, you want to give your business personality and have that continue all the way through your website. And then last is going to be graphics. Sometimes it's easier to show than tell, especially if you're selling something that has some complexity to it. You want to make it easy for people to digest the information that you're giving them. You want to make sure it's simple and clean. You don't want to overwhelm folks. You're always going to be the most knowledgeable about your business, and you don't want to. It's kind of unrealistic to think that your customer is going to ever know as much as you do. But you want to make sure that in a quick glance, they can kind of understand what it is that you're doing. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more detail. So, color, again, is going to be a powerful way to create a strong feeling for your brand and in turn your website. So you want to make sure you're picking a palette and then sticking to it. If you're selling, an example here, if you're selling children's clothing, you probably want to have like brighter, happier, more cheerful colors. Think the yellows, oranges, greens. You probably wouldn't see a ton of like muted or quite quiet colors like grays or beige, right? Because they're kids. And so you're giving them a lot of information about who your brand is and who it's for through color. And then I'll also send this out after, but you can read a little bit more about color and branding online. There's a ton of different resources out there. So you don't have to necessarily be a designer or branding expert yourself. You can, find lots of resources on YouTube or online. So now we'll talk a little bit about fonts. Again, as I mentioned, they help give your customer a hint into what your business style is. It's subtle, but they actually can give people a lot of information about your brand. So you'll see here, if your brand is traditional, you might use what's called a serif font. So it has the little tabs on the end of the letters. If you're more modern, you might use something that's sans serif, meaning it doesn't have that. It's kind of cleaner and simpler. If you're serious, you might use a more traditional font, something like, Times New Roman, something that people are used to seeing on, professional documents. And if your brand is a little bit more fun, maybe you can use something a little bit more eclectic or a little bit more whimsical, like we're seeing in the example here. So again, your font can tell people a lot about your business and who you are and who you're trying to sell to. So general rules on fonts, as I mentioned. So serif fonts, these are the ones with the extra little tabs on the top and bottom of letters, are seen as being, a little more traditional, old-timey, but also like trustworthy. Serif fonts, the ones that don't have the little tabs on them, serif fonts, the ones that do have the tabs on them, tend to be a little bit easier on the eye when you're reading through paragraphs because, and again, this is like very subtle, but The little tabs actually help your eye follow along. So some popular serif fonts include Times New Roman or Georgia. Sans serif fonts, so these are the ones without the little extra tabs, they're seen as a little bit more modern, a little bit more bold, and sort of like a clean aesthetic. They look great for headers because they're, simple, they have less to them, so they're, popular, so they're easier to read. And some popular sans serif fonts include Helvetica or Arial. So obviously there are many more choices than these, but they're just a couple of ways for you to begin to think about the fonts that you'll use on your website. So in general, one good sort of rule of thumb is that you don't need to necessarily pick one, sans serif or serif for your website. But I think the easiest way to kind of keep it simple and keep it clean is to choose, no more than 3 types of fonts for your website. Sometimes that can be a little bit cluttered or be a little bit hard on the eye. So in general, you don't want to have more than 3 fonts, and you don't want to have more than 2 different types of weights. So meaning, bold or like italics or any of those. So you can see just a simple example on the right. We're using a sans serif for the header because it's bolder and a little bit easier to see. And then you might want to use some of the serifs in a paragraph because it's a little bit easier for people to read long paragraphs and long pieces of information. And then in general, for subheaders or smaller text, you can use a sans serif again. So I won't go too far into fonts, but there's a lot of detail, and it's one of those things you can kind of, you can get into a rabbit hole. So one key takeaway from all of this, in your colors, in your fonts, in the photos, in the graphics that you use, is you want to just stay as consistent as possible. That's really like the crux of all of your branding. You want to make sure that your customers can easily recognize you. I had one client who, they didn't necessarily want to go into they didn't want to invest in their branding. They weren't totally sure that it was going to pay off. They sold, like these amazing cookies. So they had a great product. People really loved them, but because they didn't invest in branding, she found that when she would go to vend at different events, if there was another person selling desserts, they weren't sure which one was hers. And so branding can actually do a lot to help your business be recognizable and help your customers, go from their first time customers to going to being loyal and being folks who are going to really like sing your praises. So as we're talking about, all of this, there's a lot of different components to building your website. And so you might feel a little bit overwhelmed, but don't worry. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can borrow from your competitors' campaigns, and you can kind of pull together different pieces that you like and emulate those on your own website. Again, I'm not saying to copy other people's websites, but you might take some of the elements that you like. So one thing that's really helpful as you're doing this is to evaluate your competition. And this is, part of getting to know your customer base and empathizing with them. It's important, if you're trying to, tell your brand story, you want to know who you're telling it to, right? You want to know who the audience is. And so it's important to put yourself in the place of your customers. You're going to say if you're selling, you're starting a shoe brand, you want to put yourself into your customer's shoes, literally. You want to go and search them on Google. You want to say, what other alternatives exist to my product? What are people buying? Is there a gap in the market? You want to just put yourself in your customer's place. Generally, I recommend people look at, maybe your 3 to 5 competitors' marketing strategies. Again, this doesn't have to be something you do super intensely, but you always want to make sure you're kind of keeping your eye out on what other people are doing, just to kind of notice trends in your industry. And it can help you, when something really resonates, then you're like, okay, this is something that I'm going to borrow for my brand. So once you do this evaluation and you're starting to look at your competitors, then you want to sort of turn back to your business and you want to say, okay, I've been looking at all these other companies, maybe I'm feeling like other people do certain things better than me, but there's always going to be some way that your brand is competitive. Is your product of better quality? Do you offer better service? Can you do better on price or timing? Those are some basic ones that you might think about, but also, is there a story? Is there a story behind your brand? And by purchasing that, they're getting a piece of it. One business that does that incredibly well was Tom's Shoes. With Tom's Shoes, they would basically for every pair that they sold, that they would donate a pair to folks in need. And so when you bought their shoes, which I never thought that they were particularly attractive, but when you bought those shoes, you're not necessarily buying them because they're the best looking shoes. You're actually buying them because they do something good. You're buying them for that story. And so, if you can tell a little bit more of your story and why your business is important and kind of the passion that you have behind it, it's going to be so much easier for people to look past maybe some of the other ways that you're not competitive because, we're humans, like we're wired to love stories and we're wired to keep those sort of top of mind. So after you've done a little bit of research to know what your customers are looking for and you understand what's out there, you're going to want to do a little bit of an exercise to even better understand your customer. The more you can understand how they make decisions, where they get their information, if the better you can understand all of those pieces, the easier it's going to be for you to reach and market to them. And so this applies to not only websites, but your entire business. So one tool that I really appreciate that can help you better understand your customer is creating what's called a customer persona. So a customer persona is kind of an avatar for who your ideal customer is. So you might include some key demographic information, things like their age, what income bracket they're in, if they have any particular interests or affinities, marital status, family status, and region. So these are just some of the things that you might think about in terms of who your customer is. And you don't necessarily have to have just one customer persona. You can create 2 to 3 different ones, depending on if you have different types of folks who buy from you. If you're already in business, one thing that can be really helpful is to think about who your best customers are, right? So if you already have that, say that customer who, when they walk in the door, that they're going to buy something, put sort of some thought into who they are and outside of being your customer. Do they have a house? Do they have a family? Are they in a profession or a particular industry? And so those can be really, those really good customers can give you some cues into who else you want to sell to. The idea when you're coming up with your customer persona is to be able to have some of those key characteristics of your ideal customer so that you can find them more easily. So if anyone's done, say, like Facebook ads, the more precise that you can get, the better, because you can put in all of these sort of key demographic pieces of information and sort of hone in who you might, who might want to buy from you. The thing that I'll say that's generally hard sometimes for new businesses is to kind of go into a more specific niche. We all want to have our product be everywhere and for everyone, but it's not necessarily realistic that that's going to happen. Even giant companies like Walmart or Amazon don't have the marketing budget to reach absolutely everyone. And so, as a small business, you're unlikely to be able to do that either. But you can really hone in on who your core customer is and your core audience and make sure that you're, sharing a bit about your business and your story and why you're passionate about it. So once you create your customer personas, you want to try to put your website in front of them. We talked a little bit about, usability and testing. So once you come up with your customer persona, you want to find people who fit into those key demographic, areas that you've highlighted, and you want to, try to do some testing. The thing with websites is that, you're always going to be sort of updating it. I kind of think of it more as a living document than anything. So, you want to put it in front of different people. You want to make sure you're keeping it in line with what your customer is looking for. And over time, that might change. No matter, even if you came up with the absolute perfect website, it'll be perfect today, and maybe a year from now it'll start to be dated, right? Because there's just always different trends that are happening. So I would say, your website is going to be sort of your the front door for your business, and you want to make it welcoming for your customers. So, if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, don't worry. It's going to be, it's going to be okay. You can totally build your website, adjust, test, and you can see what's going to be most effective. We don't usually get it right on the first try, and this is why it's important to get feedback from other people. When you're designing your approach to building your website and how you're going to tell your story, you likely will have one or two different marketing strategies that you try at a time. You don't necessarily want to do absolutely everything at once. Again, keep in the sort of spirit of testing, and that all of these things that you're doing are just an experiment. So say you have a website existing today, and you want to give it a little bit of a refresh, try out some different colors and see how people respond to that. If that doesn't work, then try out maybe changing some different fonts. If that doesn't work, try doing some different graphics or different images. You don't need to have it perfect on the first try. It's always going to be trial and error no matter what. And then, in general, when you're creating your website, you want to have kind of a calendar for yourself in terms of how you're going to keep your website up to date and like things that are going to be seasonal for you. So you might set some quarterly goals for how you want your website to perform. So you might set some KPIs, so key performance indicators, on how many visitors you want to get, what you want your conversion rate to be, and you can kind of break them down into your monthly goals and then break that into weekly tasks. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't get too overwhelmed with the task of a website. You can break it down into smaller pieces, and that'll make it easier for you to have a website that's compelling and one that feels like your own brand. So if you take nothing else away from this class, the thing that you want to remember is that you can't be everything to everyone, but you can be everything to someone. And so you really do want to hone in on who your core audience is going to be, and make it, special to them. So you can make your website something that feel, when they go on your website, they feel like it's made for them. And that's going to be the basis of building, a really healthy e-commerce site that can be, beloved, and people enjoy going to your website, and they they have an easy time using it. It's presentable, and for you, it'll also be something that you're happy to share with the world and want to promote. So with that, we'll do a quick recap, and then we'll move into the Q&A. So the three elements of good e-commerce are presentation, usability, and security. So making sure your website looks good, it functions well, and people feel safe putting their credit card information into your website. You want to remember that your website is an extension of your brand. And to do that, you can make sure you're using the same consistent voice and consistent tone for your business. Some of the elements that you might use would include color, font, images, and graphics. When you're deciding how you're going to build your website and who you're building it for, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can research your competition, put yourself into your customer's shoes, and make sure that you understand what else is in the market for them, and really empathize with your customer. And then lastly, you want to design your marketing approach by taking the sort of big project of a website and break it down into smaller pieces, and always stay in the mindset of testing, and you're sort of experimenting with what you can do with your website. Okay, and with that, we will transition into Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ari. Great presentation, and hopefully everyone found some great snippets of advice in there. Before we jump into Q&A, I'm going to launch a quick poll just to get a pulse on what other topics you, the entrepreneurs that we serve, are looking to learn from. So in addition to this one, which of these topics in this poll are you looking to learn more about? These poll results will help us target more awesome content around these areas. So thank you so much for participating. Looks like marketing is the leader. No surprise there, but looks like finance, sales, team, and survival are also there. So great. Thank you all for sharing. Okay, Ari, We've got some questions here in the Q&A. For those of you who haven't dropped your questions in yet, make sure you put them in. We'll try to get to them all. So Ari, to start us off, what's the best method to engage people with a subscription-based model for an e-commerce site?
Yeah, I think it'll sort of depend on what type of product you're selling, but in general, you want to really focus on the ease and convenience portion when it comes to subscriptions. I feel like that's sort of one approach that people take. So if it's a consumable item, things like coffee that you probably drink every day, the ease and convenience is something that you want to sell. If you're doing sort of more specialty products, if say you're doing a subscription model of a bunch of different beauty products, you want sort of the element of either curation or surprise. So things that you wouldn't necessarily normally find on your own. You're like signing up for a subscription because you want to be exposed to new things.
Awesome. And they just chimed in the chat. They said it's a dog training business online.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have two dogs. Sign me up. But I would say in general, it's you're probably selling something along the lines of consistency, right? So I train my dogs. I maybe fall off for a month or two, then they start acting up. Then I train them again. So your subscription model is really about consistency and like the convenience and ease.
Awesome. Let's see. There's a question here that their business has. Their primary clientele is 45 to 70, but they also have a fair amount of 25 to 35-year-olds. So how to create a website that draws in both age ranges?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one because, at the end of the day, like you can't really reach absolutely everyone. So I would focus on prioritizing who your core customer is and making the website, primarily for them first. Even if you do have, say, several different customer personas, there's always going to be one that's, going to be the most fruitful for you. So focus on that first. And then, the rest will kind of fall in line.
Yeah, that's great advice. And if you're curious on a case study on that, one of our advisory board members was on the team that helped design the Swiffer, and they designed the Swiffer for a 20-year-old college student, but they marketed it. It needed to be that easy for a 20-year-old male, lazy college student to get out of bed and clean his house. But they marketed it to a much broader population, but they designed it for the ease of getting that lazy guy off the couch. Let's see. Are there some ADA accessibility rules that we need to follow that go beyond the color and style of fonts?
Yeah, I think that one of the big ones will be your contrast. I think that's one that people don't usually think about. So if you're doing like a light blue background and like a barely darker blue font, that's something that's going to be difficult for people with low vision. The other thing that you can add to make your website more accessibility is what are called alt tags. So for folks who don't have vision impairment, if you have a photo of something, the alt tag actually tells them in words what they're looking at. You've probably seen that sort of thing on Instagram where people will put the ID in the caption. So that's just one way to make your website a little bit more ADA friendly. There's a whole list of compliance things that you can look up online, but those are the two big ones that people generally miss.
Awesome. Let's see. Great questions. Keep them coming in. How do you recommend honing in your branding? They're in education, but don't want the fun branding because they're branding for parents rather than the kids.
I mean, branding can be a whole giant exercise. So I don't have like a quick and easy answer, but I would start with the customer persona. So honing in, you're kind of telling me while the end user is the child, like you're really marketing to parents. So hone in on what type of parents you're trying to reach. Are they limited in geography, or they have a certain income bracket? Focus on that, and then get to questioning them. Get a focus group together, ask folks what other brands they like. So you don't have to come up with everything from scratch. You can do some research and sort of look at what your competition is doing and certain elements that resonate with you and resonate with your ideal customer, and take those elements and build it into your own brand.
Great advice. Nice. We got a couple questions here about just like getting started. So somebody was asking, should we use services like GoDaddy? There's a ton of different ones like Wix to build a website, or should they hire a professional first?
I would say I it's sort of tricky. I would say GoDaddy is not one of the platforms I recommend for people when they're brand new. It can be a little bit difficult. That and WordPress are two that I get asked about a lot. I would recommend using either Shopify or Squarespace, or even Square now has an e-commerce version. Those are all pretty easy to make consistent. I would say Squarespace probably aesthetically looks the best off the bat because they have a lot of really easy templates for you to use. So if you're not necessarily making sales for your business yet, and you need to bootstrap, use some of those platforms. I would, of course, like a professional does this all day, every day. And so they're going to probably be able to build a better quality website. But that's not to say that you can't start out just doing it on your own using one of those platforms.
I love that. And me personally, I've been in a situation where we hired somebody to make a website, and then it was too technical for me to update myself. So yeah, those other offerings are awesome just to get started, to see how people are reacting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. I'm bootstrapping. Is it wise to outsource to less costly foreign development help, or for web and software app build help?
That's one that I get asked pretty frequently. I actually find it generally costs, I don't know, trying to save that money costs more sometimes, because you're gonna have to probably have them do a lot of fixes. You might have like the time and, I don't know, kind of pain in the butt of needing to project manage your website. So I have some people who say like, oh, I could just hire a photographer, a copywriter, and a developer off of Fiverr or Upwork. And you could, but you're going to need to be that point person who tells the photographer, I need it in this certain dimension so it works on our website, and the copy is for this person. And, pulling all the pieces together can be complex, and it can be, I find, a little bit more headache than it's worth, because you probably have better things to do with your business. You want to spend your time doing the things that you uniquely have to do, and that's part of scaling and growing a good business, is not trying to do absolutely everything, because you can't, and you won't have as much fun.
Love that. And also time zones can be challenging because you lose a little bit of time if somebody's on the other side of the globe too. Is it okay to put a client testimonial section/category on a website?
Oh, sorry, say that one more time, please.
Oh, all good. Someone's asking, is it okay to put a client testimonial section/category on a website?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you should. It's the concept behind it is called social proof. We're social beings. We like to do what other people are doing. And so it shows, trust, in that you have people, who like and enjoy your business. So absolutely, definitely put those on your website.
Love it. And you were speaking about fonts a bit. Somebody's asking, can you recommend a modern but serious font?
Oh, a modern but serious font. I don't know. There's so many. I personally love Helvetica New. That's what I use for my brand. It's, Helvetica, I think, has been a little overused. It's what we see on like subways and things like that. But Helvetica New is like a little bit less ubiquitous. But there are so many good fonts out there. I mean, you could literally do a Google search for exactly that question and come up with a ton of different possibilities.
Love it. Yeah, I'm a big Helvetica New fan too. One of the things I grapple with is deciding how to market myself as an artist/writer versus my arts and business consultancy. Do you suggest merging the two brands or keeping them separate?
That one's so hard. I've suffered with that myself because I run a design studio, but I also am an artist and do like large scale murals. I've sort of found that having two separate websites work a little bit better, just so you're not confusing people and how they're engaging with you. But I would say so for the websites, you maybe want to keep them separate so they can be more focused. But when you're doing, your marketing, you want to make sure you're marketing yourself and all the things that you do more fully. So I'd say, if you're posting on LinkedIn, post about both of those things. Or if you have social media, post about both of those. You want to show the full range of what you can do, but probably keep the website separate.
Yeah. Ooh, and my dog just loved that answer. Hopefully, hopefully he will relax a little bit.
You need the dog trainer.
I have one. They're just not here right now. Let's see. If you're in an idea stage business, can you provide some concrete ways to build a solid customer personas to guide the early stages of development?
Yeah, if you're still at that early point where you haven't made sales just yet, I would say this is where doing your research on your competition will be really helpful. So if I say we're starting a new skincare line and I want to appeal to folks who really like, I don't know, clean skincare, I might look at Aveda. I might look at a few different brands in that category and sort of see, are there certain like origins, like you might see that they use certain types of fonts, they use the same kind of colors, they use the same sort of messaging. So again, doing that research will help you not have to invent everything, and it'll help you better empathize with your customer and understand how they make choices and what's important to them.
Awesome. One thing, another question here, one thing that entrepreneurs often struggle with is having so much information, but not knowing how to display it. So one of our attendees was saying that they have a lot of things going on. How do they organize their website so it doesn't feel like somebody is drinking from a fire hose?
Yeah, that's that's a really tough one. I actually find like doing an outline of how you would write an outline for an essay can be really helpful because it forces you to decide, what's the most important sort of scannable piece of information up top. And that's probably, the A or 1, those things are going to be your headers on your website. And then, the things that are indented further and further get more nested into their own pages. So you want people to be able to sort of see the range of things that you do, but not get too much information. So what LegalZoom did was really helpful, right? They just broke it down into business, wills, I don't know, other security, so what other categories. So you're not needing to get like the whole, giant list of everything that they're doing. You can actually just scan it and sort of see the categories that they have.
Super helpful. Somebody is looking to starting a new business, and is it necessary to use all social platforms, or is it okay to focus on a couple plus the website?
Yeah, fewer are better. That's my approach to social media. I would say, focus on your website and maybe 1 or 2 platforms that you can, you're excited about and you personally like using. I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough in entrepreneurship is that you should be creating a business that you like running and not a job for yourself, right? You don't want to create a job that you dislike by getting on, say TikTok annoys you. Don't get on TikTok, that's unsustainable for you, right? And once you get 1 or 2 platforms sort of locked in and you feel like, you're running that consistently, then it gets easier to add on more platforms because you're taking kind of the same information and just, distributing it. I would say in general, when it comes to social media, just like branding, consistency is going to be the most important. So often people will ask, how often should I post on Instagram? And my answer is going to be however much you can with being consistent. So if to start, that's once a month, that's fine. But the thing that works less well is if you say, you go really hard on it for 2 weeks and you're posting twice a day and then you just sort of fall off. That's not going to be super effective for your website. Or for your business, sorry.
Yeah. Focus is hard for all humans, especially entrepreneurs. All right, and then we've got another question here. Can you recommend any techniques for making technical content more approachable for non-technical customers?
Yeah, I would say it's going to be sort of the same thing as like creating a strong outline. People oftentimes just need to know where they're going before you tell them. The good strategy for communication is you're going to tell people what you're going to tell them. You tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. And that just makes it easier for people to absorb information. So kind of, making it scannable in terms of if somebody didn't want to read the whole bulk of all of your technical information, what can they get from the headers and the subheaders? Can they get enough information just from that without having to dive, totally headfirst in?
Mm-hmm. And what I've found is visuals help, at least my brain, unpack technical things.
Yep.
Because I have coded one line in college, and that was about it. Let's see. E-commerce has a potentially global reach. How do we be culturally appropriate with such a wide and diverse potential audience?
I mean, that's really hard. I guess there's sort of two things that come to mind. One is that you do need to sort of niche down into who you're trying to reach. Again, even like large companies like Amazon and Walmart can't reach everyone. And so I would say kind of like focus in a little bit more on who your core, like most engaged customer base is going to be. And then I guess the second thing that comes to mind is to, stay in that spirit of experimentation. So if you're trying to figure out how to be, more culturally sensitive, if you're selling in, say, like a new market, it's going to be important for you to do research, ask people, ask what they think about it. You can't just know it on your own. So treat it like your experiment.
Love it. All right, Ari. Well, we could spend so much more time with you, but we are almost at the end of our session today. If somebody were going to tune into the last minute of this, what's one key takeaway that you'd like everyone in attendance to come away with today?
Yeah, I would say tell your story. Every entrepreneur I've met has one, and a website's a great way to do that.
What a nice way to end. Well, Ari, thank you so much on behalf of everyone in attendance and everyone on our team. Really appreciate you joining us today to share your insights and expertise.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. Well, for everyone still on, thank you for joining us. And we hope that you can join our upcoming webinars. You can use the link in the chat to check out a few of those upcoming events next week. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all online soon. Have a good one, everyone.